This is episode 8 of Art, Why I Stuck with a Junkie Jazz Man. In episode 7, I was working in the Synanon School and plotting to get visitation rights with my daughter, Maggie. In episode 8, Art Pepper does not appear at all. This episode is about my relationship with Synanon, with my daughter's stepmother. Here's episode 8. Barrett had remarried. He was snapped up by an older woman, one of my mother's younger friends. Carla, an ex-socialist, had always liked him, though she told Maggie later she had married him in order to acquire her. I believe this. When I was 12 and she was in her 20s, she'd urged me to leave my mother and move in with her, and shocked me then and pissed me off by talking bad about my mother. In later years, I always thought of Carla when I heard Dylan's line, "He stole my baby and he wanted to steal me." Carla was an artist. She was tall with high cheekbones, big wild eyes, a big expressive lipsticked mouth. I always thought she looked like Joan Crawford. She was high-strung and easily enraged, imputing all kinds of evil to everyone who wasn't in her erratically expanding and contracting special circle. She had more ex-friends than anyone I ever knew. Over the next years, she burned, yes, in their backyard, a dress my mother and I had made for my daughter. Carla burned it up in front of her. Carla wrote to me in Synanon and tried to make me believe that my daughter would be better off without me muddying up her life. But my visit with Maggie made it clear she needed to spend time with me. When I was 4, my mother had left me for several months in a nursery school in LA to follow my stepfather to New York. My real father visited me there sometimes on weekends. When my mother eventually brought me to New York, my father followed, and I'd had irregular visits with him there as well. He took me on buses all over town, and I remember 2 outings. He took me to the Bronx Zoo, where we rode on a little train. And one day he took me downtown somewhere. In my memory, it will always be Fifth Avenue. He was in a good mood and burst into loud song as we strolled down this big street. In his pleasant tenor, he exulted, "Some think the world was made for fun and frolic, and so do I. And so do I. Hearken, hearken, music sounds afar. Hearken, hearken, music sounds afar." And so on. Hearken, hearken, music sounds afar. Funiculi, funicula. People turned, stared, smiled. When I finally saw Gene Kelly in the movies, I saw a huskier version of my father and heard my father's voice. I was too young to be embarrassed. I was thrilled. The world, as it often does for children and sometimes for adults too, sprang open another door and let me glimpse an attitude, a style it would also tolerate. Funiculi, funicula. You could believe in and propagandize simple joy. I know now that my father was probably manic depressive. And for most of my later life, I've feared and been ashamed of this genetic craziness. But at 5, I just saw freedom in his out loud happiness. My father has said that my mother eventually told him that Dick Fraser, my stepfather, turned sour after each of these visits. "And Laurie's so puzzled," she said. "She doesn't know what she's done." So my father talked it over with his shrink, who, he told me later, advised him to stop seeing me. And he did. For about 5 years, there was no contact at all. I think that was bad advice. I felt for years he didn't care for me. I knew Dick Fraser didn't, and he was sour all the time, except when he was drunk. I realized that Maggie's life at home might be made uncomfortable if she continued to visit me, but that discomfort would be nothing to the loss of her mother. I couldn't leave Synanon. I had no home, no money, no lawyer. And I believed that all my gains in character would fall away immediately if I walked out the door. Carla and Barrett refused to grant me any more visits, but Synanon honored my hours of volunteer work in their legal department. I spent all my vacuums clerking there by giving me a lawyer, and we went to court. At the hearing, I was turned out demurely in a skirt and matching jacket, a knit, expensive costume with a Laura Ashley label in it, a paisley print in beige and brown and deep shades of green and wine. I got that outfit from a square in trade for a clinging, soft, and very short suede dress I'd made during my slutty hippie days. I borrowed a pair of modest brown pumps to wear as well. And I'd been reading Shaw's St. Joan to prepare myself as a model for believing in my cause. And so I glowed, clean and righteous, pure of heart. Carla and Barrett brought two, quotes, experts with them, two psychiatrists, one redbeard and one brown one, who claimed that Maggie would be confused by having two mothers, one of whom was a member of a, quotes, tribe. But the judge congratulated me on my sobriety and permitted visits on alternate weekends, Friday night through Sunday afternoon, at my mother's and second stepfather's house, in order to avoid the culture shock the shrink said she'd experience at Synanon. Synanon wasn't in the habit of letting residents sleep or even work away from the vigilant community, but they let me do it. And so began my tricky love affair with my daughter. There was no doubt she longed to see me and I her, but the pain of separation was part of every visit, a shadow on the best and most boring minutes. It was up to me not to burden Maggie with my grief, but also not to make her think I could take her or leave her alone. Carla and Barrett shared a paranoid view of life, and I knew Carla was a chronic scene maker, tuning her voice to a fine minor key of ironical despair, implying at the most ordinary moments, by a strangled, half hysterical laugh, the suffering she hid inside her anguished heart. By hint and tone alone, Carla could create dank places where the wildest fears could sprout. I felt my mission with Maggie was to demonstrate to her a drier, cooler, braver, and more playful way of life. I got my mom to buy us a Super 8 camera, and we made animated films. With a makeshift loom strung from the posts in my mom's back patio, we wove a hanging. We wrote stories, a paragraph at a time from each of us, made collaborative drawings to go with them, molded fantastic whole head masks out of paper mache. You mold them over a balloon and danced about in them. I made up serial bedtime stories about the adventures of a cat named Margarine, a doll named Melisande, and a little girl named Juliet. I gave my all to those visits and took every scrap of pleasure I could from them, always with the knowledge that I mustn't lay on Maggie, as I knew Carla did, any weighty, freighted kind of love. And since it's not my nature to be subtle, it was easy for me not to keep things light, but to keep things in the moment. This insistence on clarity and currentness is a trait of Maggie's too. I don't know if she picked it up from me or got it genetically, but she tells me she used it very satisfyingly on her stepmother throughout her childhood, and with it was able to keep Carla's miasma of implication conveyed through convoluted speech or through her heavy soap opera silences at bay. She'd respond to Carla's swampy insinuations by simply asking her, "What do you mean?" She never got a straight answer, but she made it clear she wouldn't play. The burning of a Cinderella costume dress we made was Carla's most overt expression of how pissed and jealous she could get. She accused me of trying to glamorize or sexualize my little girl. Softcore porn was what she called the Maxfield Parrish illustrations she remembered seeing on Maggie's infant walls. I had cut them out of an old book of fairy tales. It drove me crazy to have to tell Maggie calmly that the burning of the dress was awful, but there was nothing I could do. I said that from now on, we'd keep all our toys and projects at my mother's house.